Welcome to AI News in 10, your top AI and tech news podcast in about 10 minutes. AI tech is amazing and is changing the world fast. For example, this entire podcast is curated and generated by AI using my and my kids' cloned voices. Here's what's shaping AI and tech this Thursday, April 23rd, 2026. The FCC just cleared AST Space Mobile to commercially offer satellite to smartphone service in the US. A big milestone for direct-to-device coverage. Rocket Lab pulled off another Electron success for Japan's space agency, lofting a cluster of experimental satellites. If you code with Copilot, heads up. GitHub's policy change to train models on user interactions kicks in tomorrow, with an opt-out. OpenAI launched a free, US-only ChatGPT for clinicians designed for real clinical workflows, and Anthropic has inked a compute mega deal with Amazon, truly eye-watering numbers, to secure capacity for the Claude roadmap. Let's dive in. But first, let's hear a word from our sponsors.
Need elite developers fast? Elite Coders connects you with rigorously vetted senior engineers in 24 to 48 hours. Staff augmentation, dedicated teams, or full project delivery, we've got you covered. Visit elitecoders.co to get started today.
Now, let's dive into today's stories. First, a regulatory green light that could change how your phone gets bars in the middle of nowhere. The FCC has authorized AST Space Mobile to deploy and operate up to 248 low Earth orbit satellites to provide what regulators call supplemental coverage from space. In plain English, your regular phone, no new hardware, connecting directly to satellites when terrestrial towers aren't available. The order, adopted April 21st, clears AST to use low-band 700 and 800 MHz spectrum in coordination with partners like Verizon, AT&T, and FirstNet. That spectrum travels farther and penetrates buildings better, which is why it's used for rural coverage and emergencies. AST says it's targeting roughly 45 satellites in orbit by the end of 2026, with launches every 1 to 2 months. Each satellite carries a massive 223 square meter array and flies roughly 425 to 690 kilometers up. It's a shot across the bow in the emerging direct-to-device race now drawing in multiple satellite and mobile players. What should you watch for? 2 things. First, coexistence with ground networks. The authorization comes with coordination conditions to avoid interference with terrestrial LTE and 5G. Second, scale and reliability. The leap from successful field calls to consistent nationwide service will hinge on launch cadence, spectrum sharing, and real-world handset experience. After years of test licenses and pilot calls, this is real commercial authority in the US market, and investors have already noticed. Staying in space, Rocket Lab notched another win for smallsat launch. The company completed its second dedicated mission for Japan's space agency, JAXA, mission codename Kakushin Rising, from Launch Complex 1 in New Zealand. Liftoff was at about 3:09 p.m. local time on Thursday, April 23rd, delivering 8 experimental spacecraft for JAXA and Japanese universities into orbit. It's one of the company's most active stretches. This marks the 8th Electron launch of the year, underscoring Rocket Lab's cadence while other providers navigate slips and scrubs. Why does this matter beyond the cool footage? Japan's tech demo CubeSats validate components, deployable structures, sensors, attitude control, before they fly on higher stakes missions. We often talk about AI in the cloud, but a lot of the edge AI future rides on space hardware, from on-orbit processing to resilient communications. Today's success strengthens Rocket Lab's position as the go-to for quick-turn small-sat deployments, while major heavy-lift players juggle competing manifest priorities. Now, a heads up for developers and engineering leaders. Tomorrow, Friday, April 24th, GitHub's revised Copilot policy takes effect for individuals. By default, GitHub will begin using Copilot interaction data, your prompts, outputs, accepted or edited suggestions, and code near your cursor, to train and improve its models, unless you opt out. Business and enterprise plans are exempt. You can change this in settings under Copilot privacy. GitHub says training on real-world interactions measurably boosts model quality. Critics argue the default opt-in nudges users who may not fully grasp the trade-offs, especially when private repository context is involved. Expect spirited internal debates today at a lot of organizations, and likely a wave of memos clarifying where Copilot can be used and which settings are allowed. Key takeaway: if you manage code at scale, double-check your developer policy. If your teams rely on Copilot Free, Pro, or Pro Plus and your repositories include sensitive logic or customer IP, opting out may be prudent until you complete a formal risk review. Conversely, if you're on Copilot Business or Enterprise, this change won't apply, but it's still worth reaffirming guardrails and logging. Plenty of plain English guides show the opt-out flow. Share one with your teams today. Before we continue, here's a quick message from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Family GPT, the AI chat platform actually designed for kids. If your children are curious about ChatGPT but you're worried about what they might see, Family GPT gives you full parental controls, content filtering, and the ability to align responses with your family's values, whether Christian, Muslim, Jewish, secular, and many more. Monitor every conversation, set usage limits, and let your kids explore AI safely. No ads, no data selling, complete privacy. Sign up free at familygpt.chat. That's FAMILYGPT.chat.
All right, let's get back to it. On to health tech. OpenAI just launched ChatGPT for Clinicians, a free offering for verified physicians, nurse practitioners, physician associates, and pharmacists in the US. It's tuned for clinical workflows like drafting notes, summarizing research, and preparing prior authorization documentation. OpenAI says it's built on models like GPT 5.4 and cites internal health bench results, plus an advisory-led test where clinicians ran 6,924 real conversations before launch. The goal is to reduce administrative drag so clinicians can focus on patients. Responsible use and human oversight remain non-negotiable, and the rollout is US only for now while verification and compliance are refined. Practically, here's what matters. Hospitals and practices are already piloting scribe tools, ambient documentation, and literature triage agents. A free, verified tier from a major model provider could accelerate adoption, especially among independent clinicians and smaller groups without enterprise contracts. Watch for EHR integrations, auditability features, and specialty-specific prompt packs next. Those will determine how fast this moves from a helpful assistant to a daily essential in clinics. Now, a power move in the compute wars. Anthropic is expanding its partnership with Amazon, committing more than $100 billion over the next decade to secure up to 5 gigawatts of compute, vast clusters spanning training and inference capacity for the Claude family. In a market where capacity is king, this is as much about strategic lock-in and predictable access as it is about raw performance. 5 gigawatts rivals the generation capacity of multiple utility-scale plants. Analysts now project big tech capital spending to surge roughly 75% in 2026 amid a scramble for AI-ready power and racks. The deal signals Anthropic's intent to scale fast in a world where model upgrades and agentic workloads eat compute for breakfast. Strategically, 2 questions loom. First, how quickly can utilities and suppliers deliver grid interconnects, substations, and cooling to match these commitments? Second, how much of this capacity will be paired with demand flex technologies, load shifting, on-site generation, long-duration storage, to ease grid stress and speed deployment? The winners in AI may simply be those who secure the power and the racks soonest and keep them full. Quick recap before we go. The FCC just gave AST Space Mobile the green light to stand up a 248 satellite direct-to-phone network. Watch spectrum coordination and launch cadence next. Rocket Lab delivered again for JAXA with an 8-satellite rideshare, keeping Electron's cadence humming. GitHub's Copilot data training policy flips on tomorrow for individuals. Opt out if needed. OpenAI rolled out a free, verified ChatGPT for clinicians aimed at documentation and research support. And Anthropic's decade-long $100 billion compute pact with Amazon underscores that in 2026, capacity is strategy. We'll keep tracking how these stories evolve through the week. Thanks for listening, and a quick disclaimer. This podcast was generated and curated by AI using my and my kids' cloned voices. If you want to know how I do it or want to do something similar, reach out to me at iamad@ainewsin10.com. That's ainewsin10.com. See you all tomorrow.